So are you really heading into chaos in 2026? Or are we simply entering a year when consequences move faster than most businesses in Singapore and Malaysia are structurally designed to handle? Well, have you noticed how policy shifts feel sharper than before? How markets react disproportionately to small signals? And how leadership missteps are exposed almost immediately rather than quietly absorbed? And have you found that even when nothing dramatic appears in the headlines, the operating environment itself feels hotter, tighter, and less forgiving than it did just a few years ago? Well, do stay with me until the end because I want to unpack three things that matter directly to you as a founder or business owner. First, why 2026 structurally compresses time and reaction windows. And second, what the 1966 and 1906 actually reveal when you strip away superstition and look at elemental structure. And thirdly, what adjustments inside your company or your business determined whether this becomes an amplification year for growth or a pressure year for damage. Now, if this kind of structural clarities help you stay steady while others react emotionally, do help me do me a favor by clicking like to this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done it, and do share this video with another founder or business owner who values preparation over prediction. Okay? So thank you very much for that. Now, let's reset the frame properly. The reference to 1966, and while it's not about dramatic repetition, and it is certainly not about fortune telling. Never, never, never. Okay? Because both were 5 horse years within the 60 years Dan branch cycle. Okay? And when the same structural configuration returns, the environmental pressure tends to rhyme, even though the service events always look different. Now, this is 2026, okay? So the 2026 annual structure is fire over fire, with no water present. Water represents moderation, liquidity, negotiation capacity, pacing, and the ability to absorb tension calmly before reacting. So when fire dominates without water, acceleration naturally outpaces stabilization. Reactions escalate faster than institutions can digest them, and systems that rely on delay, buffering, or extended consensus begin to struggle. When there is insufficient water, guess what? The environment doesn't slow down on its own, which means leadership must consciously create pacing because the cycle itself will not provide it. When consequences compress, then feedback loops shorten. And when feedback loops shorten, the cost of hesitation rises. Does that make sense? Now, if you look back at 1966, you see social friction intensifying globally. Authority openly questioned, generational tension surfacing visibly, and systems pushed towards their structural limits. And if you look back at 1906, you will see infrastructure and physical systems breaking under pressure, entire cities forced into abrupt rebuilding, and institutions scrambling to stabilize environments they assumed were solid. And although the expressions differed, the underlying theme was consistent, which is heat, acceleration, stress on leadership, and exposure of structural weakness. Now, we at this channel constantly emphasize that metaphysics is a pattern recognition and not a prediction, okay? So this actually matters because we are not saying history must repeat, but rather observing that when fire counters metal leadership, faces strain because metal represents governance, authority, compliance, and structural discipline. And when water is absent, liquidity and negotiation mechanisms weaken, which forces adjustments to happen abruptly rather than gradually. And this is why in a fire-dominant year like now, leadership health is not a personal topic, but an operational variable. Guess why? Because fatigue combined with speed produces poor judgment. And poor judgment in a compressed feedback environment carries larger consequences than before. So fire amplifies visibility, okay? And in a digitally connected economy, visibility spread at speeds, which means opportunity expands quickly, but reputational exposure expands just as fast. And this is also why digital fragility becomes a theme in the fire cycles, because when fire overwhelms metal output systems can overheat. And in modern terms, that translates into cybersecurity risk, supply chain vulnerability, system overload, and over-reliance on digital infrastructure without offline resilience. Now, this doesn't mean disaster is guaranteed, and it doesn't mean collapse is inevitable, because fire cycles also correlate with the speed of innovation, decisive repositioning, bold product launches, technological breakthroughs, and market leaders gaining visibility quickly. But what changes is this: tolerance for inefficiency. So in a slower cycle, mistakes are absorbed quietly and corrected gradually, okay? But in the faster cycles like now, mistakes are exposed publicly and corrected under pressure. Now, what does it mean to you as founders in Singapore and Malaysia mean? Well, this is not about fear, of course. It's also not about mysticism. It's about structural adjustment. But why? If consequences compress, then internal decision cycles must shorten. Approval hierarchies that once provided safety begin to create delay risk. And liquidity planning cannot assume external conditions will remain stable long enough for slow correction. And when water is absent, disciplined cash management becomes your substitute for environmental stability, because liquidity buffers replace the natural pacing that water would normally provide. And when fire presses on metal leadership's ego, becomes dangerous, because in visible cycles, overconfidence is simplified and miscalculations become more public. When fire amplifies, speed team alignment becomes critical, because if your managers are unclear or reactive, the entire organization absorbs that instability very quickly. How about regulatory adjustments? The world, they may feel sharper, geopolitical tension may escalate faster, public discourse may intensify more rapidly than expected, and markets may correct aggressively before stabilizing. And these movements are consistent with a fire-dominant environment that moves fast and cools later. And this is also why at Dazzling Architect, we emphasize that the key is whether you react or respond, because reacting spreads heat while responding channels it. And in fire cycles, disciplined response becomes a competitive advantage, my friends. And the relevant question, therefore, is not whether 2026 will feel intense, because structurally it will, okay? But the question is really whether your business model is optimized for speed or still calibrated for slower environment where time cushions mistakes. And if your systems rely on extended deliberation, informal cash tracking, unclear delegation, or leadership that waits for perfect certainty before acting, acceleration will expose those weaknesses quickly. But if your structure is lean, your cash discipline is clear, and your decision-making hierarchy is tight, and your communication lines are direct, guess what? Fire can amplify your performance rather than destabilize it. So back to 1966 and 1906. While they were amplification years where strength expanded rapidly and weaknesses surfaced without delay. And 2026 likely carries the same amplification quality inside a far more interconnected, digital, and economically interdependent global system. Now, the final point I want to make in this video is this: fire doesn't create weakness because it exposes it. Fire doesn't create strength also because it magnifies it. So the Fire Force 2026 doesn't determine whether you win or lose. What it determines is how quickly your existing structure is tested And if your foundation is disciplined, guess what? Acceleration becomes leverage, which is a good thing. But if your foundation is loose, acceleration becomes pressure. Well, it will act against you. Okay? So if this way of looking at 2026 helps you think structurally rather than emotionally, then do me a favor, click like in this video, subscribe to my channel if you really haven't done it, and share this video with another founder or business owner who values preparedness over panic. If you want ongoing analysis framed specifically for business owners and founders like you navigating period 9 and the fire horse cycle, do subscribe to my Destiny Architect Telegram chat, where we continue these conversations in depth without noise. So you see, once again, the fire force doesn't determine the outcomes. Your structure does. See you in my next video.